Hey, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you are here. Good morning. Welcome to Monday, July 11th, 2022. I feel like I've been looking towards this date and time for so long. It's kind of interesting that we're here now. So, this is the Starseed Ministry. Welcome back, everyone. If you're new here, welcome. Thank you for stopping by. Hello to the Starseed Fellowship. We're going to be trying to meet again this week, if the universe allows. So I'm going to be putting a survey up on Subscribestar. Just keep an eye out for that and give your input on which days and times are going to work for you. If you're interested in what that is all about, the Starseed Fellowship and the Catalyst Classroom, where we go over the Starseed stuff, astrology, mythology, cosmology, and bring it all together and really alchemize this information into an understanding of what it's all about. So if you're interested in that, there are links in the description box below for all of that stuff. So I just want to get right into it. Wow, what a weekend! How are you doing? How is everyone feeling? I'm a little surprised that it's already Monday. It feels like it went very quickly. Maybe that's because the weekend before was a holiday weekend that lasted longer. But the sun is starting to get more active. So I'm wondering too if our relationship to time, of course, is changing as our perception is changing. And when there's more solar weather and solar activity, we are getting more information, right? There's more plasma. There is more input into our experience, and that is going to change our perception and therefore change our relationship with time. So how are people doing? As anticipated on Friday's astrology forecast, it did seem pretty intense this weekend. I myself, personally, within my own sphere of experience, had the ability to really step back and be and function as observer. But there were some moments that I felt very impacted, mostly about what was going on in the larger sphere, or the macro, in terms of the solar weather and that type of experience. So I'm going to go into that too. I want to show you what's been going on with the sun and the increase in intensity of the flares and my own personal experience, and kind of make some connections here to how you may be feeling in your body. So many of us already know that there's connection, and we're starting to already track these types of solar weather phenomenon, and then how we are feeling in our body. And there are some correlations here. So I'm going to go into that again, just to keep the ball rolling on that. But how are people feeling? I've kind of watched people go through their own processes of a moon in Scorpio, of course, and getting really into the depths of their own feels, subconscious, kind of sinking down into that space and what came out of it. So it's kind of, it's varied. I know I can say from my own personal experience, who I was interfacing with, it seemed to be a lot of just kind of reality checks that were coming out emotionally. And well, I wouldn't necessarily call it an irony, but the challenge to it all is not disconnecting from those feels as they get deeper and potentially darker and more intense, and being observer and witness to that experience in people that were not completely conscious of that, that being a potential over the weekend, right? They're not following their astrology. They're not really tracking how their internalized landscape is interacting with what's happening outside of them, right? And many people, this is part of the spiritual journey when you make that when you come to that awareness, right, the connection with those things, and consciously and intentionally interact with it. So people who are still in the stages of awakening, right, on many different levels right now, are starting to face that. And we saw that in the reading from last Monday, that this was going to start really turning over. So there's plenty of outside, external type of events that we can look at that are they're pretty intense, and they have a very specific theme that has to do with, rebellion and pushing back against authority and sovereignty and asserting one's sovereignty. So we'll look at the astrology of today. Of course, Pluto return to the United States. it's now at its official location. We talked about that last week as well. So we are truly crossing some measure of threshold. Pluto's also opposite Procyon. This is a starseed origin and a very specific story about where the core of our own stability and sense of self really comes from, and how that's challenged in a lot of ways when there are other events that may have an impact on the institutions or the customs or the family structure that protects us. So and nourishes us and allows us to grow. But part of growing is growing beyond that container. And sometimes that can be really destabilizing and scary. And the dark side of Cancer energy is definitely Munchausen syndrome, right? To put it bluntly. So, and if you're not familiar with that, you can look it up and see how that can be the dark side of the Cancerian archetype, is to be so insular and to manipulate in order to create artificially that environment. So, there's a lot to talk about, and there's so much happening that it almost seems like if you try to wrangle any of it, even in your own mind, it will spin you out of control. And so it's always about being in rhythm and alignment with what's going on intentionally and consciously, and being on the wavelength that you actually want to be on, or at least being aware of the wavelength that you are on and being in harmony with it rather than being in dissonance with it. So I'm going to check in with the stream here and see how it's going. People are talking. So Barb Hill says, though it flew by, I had lots of heaviness letting go of old friends and identities that no longer resonate. It's a very intense. Felt like crisis crossing timelines. Intense. Yeah, it was very, very intense this weekend along many lines. And that Scorpio moon, I feel like, has been a big part of it. VC says, I've definitely been caught in emotional low frequency for the past several weeks. Over the weekend, it felt like it lifted. I'm so grateful to be getting back to my energetic self. That's great. I think that is a great I like the way that you framed that, because it's going to be actually incredibly relevant to the reading today. And so you may find yourself kind of on the front end of something that many people are hopefully, can find their way to experiencing. So let's put a pin in that, because we're going to see how that comes out in today's reading. So thanks for sharing. Yeah. So in terms of my own experience, when we get into the solar weather, I'll circle back to this story. But I definitely felt connections to the solar weather and the magnetics of the planet. Friday evening, for instance, there was a lot of geomagnetic disturbance that then settled down, and then there was a big M-class flare. And when there was a lot of geomagnetic disturbance, right, when the solar wind from a coronal hole was kind of having an impact on the magnetosphere and the ionosphere, and it was very dense. There was a lot of density and a lot of pressure in the magnetosphere. Started getting a headache that came out of nowhere, and I was like, oh, that's very interesting. And then it dissipated, and then I felt better, so I went out and did something. And as I was in the process of doing something out in public, there was a solar flare, a pretty big one. And so whether or not a CME is going to reach us as a result remains to be seen. But it was so connected into within an hour of that flare, and a very strong feeling that usually often precedes when I have a certain type of cardiovascular, I guess. I don't know if it's a disorder, it's a syndrome. It's called vagal syncope, right? It's when the vagus nerve, for whatever reason, pretty much drops your blood pressure drops very suddenly, and they believe it has something to do with your blood pressure and the ability of the heart to get blood up to your brain, right? Because maybe you've been standing, you do something that affects your blood pressure, right? I had done none of these things that in the past have triggered this for me to have basically a seizure-like episode. It's more than fainting. And so I started to get all those symptoms, and like my body was doing a lot of weird things like out of nowhere as I went into this public sphere, and I kind of had to really center myself and energetically really concentrate on balancing, right, finding an equilibrium, and then it passed, and then I was like, okay, I'm good. And then found out later that there was this huge flare that happened on the sun, and it was very connected and correlated to that based on tracking when these things were happening. So when we get to the space weather part, I'll show you, what it looks like in the charts and what it looks like, so that you can track these things for yourself and see, because this is a big part of what we are really here to reinforce within ourselves, is to energetically be prepared for these changes, whatever they are. The magnetic field is weakening and it possibly is going to shift its position. That is a very strong likelihood. A micronova from our sun is also going to be a pretty strong type of event that will also impact us at that level, magnetically, electromagnetically, electrically. So knowing what this feels like in your body is important, and how you can manage it and modulate it through your own consciousness and your ability to manage that energy through your own consciousness, through your spirit, which is why Reiki, something like Reiki, right? Or if you practice things like acupuncture, or, very energetic types of massage therapy like craniosacral, shiatsu is very energetic, things like that, or very subtle forms of body work, then you know that, and martial arts, right? Movement arts, yoga. This is what, hatha or physical yoga is for. It is for preparing the body for the energetic upgrade, right? Kundalini yoga is working with that energy that through our passions and our creativity and our expression and our drive and our joy opens up naturally, right? That's the Kundalini, that's the fifth house of astrology. So there are, whatever, meditation is great as well. Whatever your practices are, it's really important that you're engaging in them in some way, shape, or form. Your healing modalities through these various things, it's really important to be aware of what these changes actually feel like and how they do then translate to people's psychological health, their mental health, our emotional health, and then the astrology that is also a big part of this pattern. Electromagnetically and through spiritual energy, right? That's the idea. So what we're looking at here actually is a picture of Andromeda Galaxy, our sister galaxy, also another starseed origin, at 27 degrees Aries from our position on Earth in terms of the Western zodiac. So I just thought this is just astronomy picture of the day, and it's in the Sahara Desert and taking a picture. So imagine without all of the light pollution of modern society out in the Sahara, it is clear, it is dry, which has a big impact on visibility and the humidity distort much of we see through the medium of light, which is what most of, astronomy is all medium of light. So Andromeda Galaxy, Andromeda, independence, liberty, freedom to be oneself, right? To act upon one's natural inclination to be is a big part of the Andromedan starseed nature. So I just thought that this is a really nice piece of eye candy as we go into today's transmission for the Starseed Ministry. So let's see here. So speaking of such things, here we have our Schumann resonance. So it's been consistently active, but it hasn't really gotten super loud in a number of days. It has been more of a kind of a gentle rolling, right? That the rhythm's consistent. There is clearly a wave function that is happening, but it hasn't gotten really, really loud necessarily. But what has been happening, as we can see here, there's a lot of stuff going on here. So let me do this. So we see that there's been flaring, right? This was on the 8th into the 9th. And then today is the 11th, right? So there's more flares. There's been more M-class flares. And it goes from, in severity or intensity, you know, all the way up to the X-ray. So the M class is something that has not happened for a little bit now, and you can start to see the uptick of these flares. There's magnetic filaments, right? There's coronal holes that are facing us that drive that solar wind speed and density, and that's measured through a lot of these types of graphs. So it had been pretty high, and then it tapered off, and it's been tapering off and settling down, as you can see. But like I said, the flaring is what's been going on. So you see the KP index, it's been stable. It's been a calm magnetosphere over the last couple days. There's been some, you know, stuff that has happened, but for the most part, it's been pretty stable, but it's the flaring that has been happening. So let me show you the coronal hole. Thought that would be worth looking at. So this coronal hole right here, you know, this is pretty much facing us, so we're going to get the wind. It's going to start picking up in terms of the magnetosphere again. And that's always, you know, a precursor potentially to more seismic activity, these coronal hole streams, because they have an impact on the electrical circuitry of the ionosphere, and perhaps there is more evidence to suggest that there's electrical connections to seismic activity than had previously been considered. So that's just the space weather to talk about. So when these flares happened, as we see here, for instance, when these flares happened on Friday, this big M-class flare, that's when I was feeling all those weird symptoms. And before that, earlier, when the geomagnetic disturbance was actually pretty high, which you actually can see, sorry guys, when you can see here, when it was up, the speed was up here and then it dropped off suddenly. That was where I was having like headaches and inflammation, and it, you know, things were kind of like rearranging themselves almost electronically, and oftentimes people will get those types of things. But what is interesting to note is that the Schumann wasn't really doing anything during that time. It didn't get really loud or like have any really strong variability. It was disturbed, but there wasn't amplification. And I think that's interesting, right? There was no buffer coming from the planet. And so I feel like people may have felt it more in their own selves, which I think is a good thing to, you know, get people more aware of the connection between their own physical body and their sense of internal landscape energetically and what is happening with the planet, with the sun, with the solar system, because it is truly very much connected. So I want to get into the reading now, because this is this reading really does seem to have a lot to do with what this weekend really felt like. And it was good to be able to forecast it and to be aware of what was coming down the pipeline. So we know that today is the Pluto return of the U.S., like the true Pluto return, because it is retrograde currently and reaching the actual degree and minute of the natal Pluto of the U.S. So if we were to read the natal chart of the U.S., we would identify that Pluto at 27 to 28 degrees, 27 degrees 34 minutes in its retrograde, is the soul of the entity, which would be the country, right? The essence of it. The soul of it has, at a default setting, is gathering and realizing power, right? True power, by way of the establishment and everything that it is able to do, which is to create kind of like an aviary, right? Where it is clearly an established, contained area, but it provides a space that is a natural habitat for all of these type of birds, for instance. That's what an aviary is, and this is what the Sabian symbol is of 28 degrees Capricorn. So, and there's a familiarity with all of these different spiritual notions and ideals, because birds represent this archetypally and in esoteric language. And so this place where Pluto gathers its power through this type of experience also shows where the transformation is going to come from via demolition, destruction, and exposure and elimination, because the soul of the entity, which in this case would be the United States as a country, is meant to really evolve towards that Pluto opposition, which is 28 degrees Cancer, which is an interesting Sabian symbol, actually. It is like an indigenous, Native American young woman bringing her white European, betrothed and beloved to meet the fam, right? To bring him back to the tribe, bring him back to the group, being like, and it really represents this returning back to a primal natural source, which of course, late Cancer, you are really getting into the consolidated and strength of the natural connection, right? And the natural connection of love, and at the root of it, and truly at its strength. And in some ways, this also demonstrates the coming together and the consolidating of what normally would be a diametrically opposed, facets of the masculine and feminine, the West and the East, right? The colonialism and the indigenous, right? Coming together and creating something that is stronger than each of them separately. But it also represents this returning back to what actually matters, which is love and connection, and human, human connection and family. So, and it seems, just like with anything else in the natal chart, especially if you're looking at it with Pluto and an evolutionary astrology kind of focus, it is the Pluto, we've gotten as far as we've gotten as we can go with this energy, which is, part of the Pluto return. And now establishing everything that is opposite of that is the direction that the country needs to go, which will require a destruction of something that has been the nature of our power, which is to embody all of the potential ideas, all of the spiritual ideals in a framework that allows each idea to be itself, right? This is truly the freedom of religion that is guaranteed in the Bill of Rights, okay? And so, and I'm not suggesting that the isolationist really strong dogma of religion and custom is the dark side as well of the Cancerian nature, right? And so we got to be careful of that as we go through the process of destruction of that which has contained this nation. And so we're going through that right now, the true Pluto return. So there'll be another pass, I assure you of that. And Pluto is still in its retrograde, so we still have deeper to go back. This is just an important moment right now in terms of the United States and its power and where it is evolving into at a soul level. And those who established this country, there was a sense of a new Atlantis. Now, that's still, the direction of that was, depending on which hand, which side of the pathway of the mystery schools they were on, because they were all involved. So, and that's, we're going through that right now. We're going through the other decision, basically. It's already been decided by the soul of humanity, certainly, and now it's just going through the process. So this reading in particular seems to be the experience of that part of ourselves that is going to start fighting with itself, right? And so this is people spinning out. Of course, this is the battle within the mind that many people are going to have, that's going to be really at the heart of the matter. And as long as people are not tapping into their joy, as long as they are not staying open or opening the door to their higher self, it is going, again, here's our Five of Swords, defeat, Venus in Aquarius, a sense of, the sensitivity that allows for a sharp pain that no argument is going to deal with. It's just going to be experienced. This is not the first time this has come up, has it? So remember that this horizontal axis is truly just one dimension of this whole experience that is being shown here in this reading. So let's start with our Prince of Discs, right? Our the heir of the earth. So this is a very industrious individual, of course, and it also represents somebody who is on their pathway, is somebody who is very patient with what they are executing and moving on their own timeline, right? And so sometimes they can seem a little cold and possibly just not very cognizant of what other people are doing. It's just because they're really focused on what they're actually up to themselves. And so stable and industrious can be very thoughtful and inventive. And I think that's important too when it comes to improving some sort of matter, right? You're applying that mental energy to something that is very earth-based. But it's very slow in following and developing ideas and plans, right? But once on the path is very steady. So what do we have this energy that seems to be related? Well, Mars is in Taurus right now. So the Prince of Discs is very much kind of like this Mars in Taurus. And so once in a rage, this is where the bull is charging forward and there's not going to be anything that really stops it unless it is bigger and providing equal and more resistance to it. So, but it's reasonable. This individual is practical and like I said, stable and industrious. But we do have Mars in Taurus, early Taurus right now. So this is kind of setting the tone of our action, which is he's got the world in his hands, right? I mean, he's still got this helmet to protect the mind, because the mind is definitely the agent of how things are moving forward with this individual. Otherwise, you end up staying very stationary and stable. So there needs to be some measure of momentum, or at least the mental and cognitive functions that are brainstorming and acting towards building something. So what this does is switches almost immediately to this battle of the mind. Right now, the Prince of Swords is truly the heir of air. So this is a very truly a mercurial type of spirit. This is someone who is full of plans and ideas, intelligent, very idealistic. And this is also somebody who will argue for the sake of arguing. So this is Orion Starseed territory all day long. Which is actually very much part of this reading, and also where because Venus is in conjunction with Mintaka right now, and Capella. But the Mintakan story is what I'm going to talk about. When we get to the astrology. So think about this Prince of Swords, the heir of air. So someone who argue for the sake of arguing, right? And throw yourself into researching something like completely and utterly, like from top to bottom. And then as soon as something new comes along, it's like you never were even interested in that, right? This is ADHD to the max. There's incredible intelligence, and there's an idealism with the Prince of Swords, but you can see that this individual is truly being led by their own ego and mental faculties, and there is a sense of kind of like just battling nothing and everything, right? The sword is kind of like behind him, and when you look at Orion, the constellation, doesn't Orion have the hand of the club up? And then you have the star of Betelgeuse, actually, that's in the armpit. That one vulnerable spot there in that moment. So that's something to consider as well, as the flailing sword, and you raise the sword to strike. I mean, you leave yourself open and vulnerable as well, and for some reason that's really sticking out to me right now. So this is the heart of it, right? You find people that coming into the moment being very industrious, putting that energy towards something, and then for some reason there is a shift and it becomes very mental, and it becomes very ungrounded in the moment. And what we see here is a serious disconnection from one's soul and their spirit and a sense of joy. So when we look at the loving elementals, the Three of Roses in the Akashic Tarot, I mean, look at this. This little toddler baby, right, is surrounded by all of the fairies and elementals, right, completely untarnished, unveiled consciousness right now with little children and sitting by the creek, right? This winding creek through the landscape. The sun is shining. There's a sense of just laughter and playfulness and childlike nature. And the loving elementals can only come to people when they are open in this way. And there's a lot of things that close down that awareness, lots of things, right? And it's going to be unique to the person. But when this card is reversed, as we see here, there's a serious split from the child within and from the union with natural world, okay? There's a loss of enthusiasm for life. It's important not to take things too seriously and really reestablish, if you need to, your joyful purpose. I think that, I'm definitely interfacing, not within me personally, but the more that you tap into your joyful purpose, the more obvious it gets when people around you are not, and they are struggling with it. And that's, that can really have an impact on you as well if they're really close to you. Do more things that make you happy if you're struggling with feeling joy for life. And not escapism, like truly happy. Know the things that are going to bring you joy, and pull yourself kind of out of the rut if you need to. Because if there is this battle of the mind here at the heart of the matter, especially after coming from some successes or at least some industriousness with Mars and Taurus, if you're not able to tap in, it feels like defeat when you have to just reach the end of that road, which is a big part of the Five of Swords. So the loving elementals reversed is showing showing the root here, the energetic root, which is not grounded in that place of joy or joyful purpose or the child within, but is absolutely either split, right? There's dissociation, or there is just this loss of enthusiasm for life. Again, these are fifth house and Leo type of energies, but it's very emotional with the roses. Now, the light of the world is also reversed here at the top. So just to go along with this theme of not being tapped into an essence here, this is not answering the call of the higher self. And as long as you ignore this part of yourself, anybody, not just you, me, but whoever, right? The you that is the collective us. As long as we turn away from this part of ourselves, we turn away to the source of our joy, which is our spirit, right? And so again, there's that fifth house Leo sun energy, which is, it is through our connection to spirit, through our soul, through our joy, through our passion, that we're able to experience it. This, when it's reversed, right? We're not answering the door. We are ignoring it. We're sidestepping it. We're like, I'll deal with this spiritual thing later. Or you just have closed the door for such a long time that you have so much like background noise, my gosh, that you can't even hear it knocking. I think that that's a big problem as well, in terms of what we choose to distract ourselves with in order to ignore this, because part of this journey is having to face some things, and a moon in Scorpio probably was making that certainly more emotionally accessible and more sensitive to it over the weekend. And now at least the moon is in Sag, where we really start to gather our strength from within. And we're going to talk about with the astrology, because we're very close to our full moon. And I talked about that on Friday. So the light of the world, you got to answer. You got to open the door. You got to reestablish this connection to something that represents your spirit, so that you can reestablish that purpose. Because outside of that is a sense of defeat, right? But it is philosophy born in pain. And so there is a potential for this to actually have a light at the end of the tunnel here, even though the sensitivity is a Venus, right? Venus in Aquarius. It's a very sharp pain. It's an intellectual crisis, right? And with the Prince of Swords, of course, intellectual crisis, and realization of one's limitations as well. You can see that the swords come together and they can't go anywhere, but they are bending, right? There is a sense of if you don't bend, you're going to break. And there is also this sense of the energy is really coming up from the bottom that you don't get from coming down from the top. There's something that has to do with the sensitivity to the material and to value, which is the Venusian or Venus part of this energy of the Five of Swords. So the defeat is the material brick wall of life, leading to the intellectual crisis. And if you are relying too much on just the intellect and the agility of your intellect, which the Prince of Swords often does, then there is a sense of defeat when you are faced, I think, with your soul being crushed, if that feels like that way, or a split from your joy, right? And part of this is because shutting down from the source of it, because or being so blocked because there's just so much of a digital fence around you through the intrusion of everything, right? Information, actual EMF pollution, whatever. Past life overlay, right? Multi-dimensional overlay, right? Sometimes we keep going through these cycles over and over, and like, what is here to learn from? And if we're not willing to really face what that is, then we just keep, we get stuck in the feedback loop of the 10, right? The light of the world is only the light of the world when we can, find our release from that false matrix of the 1 and 0, right? It has its place, but the whole point is to transcend that, to move out of that. Otherwise, you're just caught in the matrix, right? The 1s and 0s, or the base 10 system. But there is some really good stuff surrounding this, I think. So number one, the in Crescent Moon, we're all going through this, right? The Six of Keys reversed is usually, number one, you can see that this degree of 27 degrees Sagittarius is a sculptor at work. This is the galactic center, which the moon is going to be crossing, okay? That is happening today, by the end of today into tomorrow. So we also know that Venus is opposite of this and will continue to be opposite of this, right? Which again is about Mintaka, which is not about putting one's belief or meaning into some sort of form, some sort of alchemical process, like a sculpture, for instance. It's more about the consciousness experience of putting ideas together, but not necessarily synthesizing them. And this is going, I feel like it's going to feel like this, not a waxing moon, but a waning moon. And of course, once we hit the full moon this week, it will be a waning moon. So to remember, as we may be experiencing a phase of decrease, a phase of prohibitive forces around us, it may feel like resources and energy are being prohibited, or they are getting smaller. That is happening for many of us. But to remember too that the moon cycle is very rapid compared to everything else. And for as much as that it's waning, it's only waning for two weeks out of the month, right? It's only half of the month. And so it just as quickly comes back around again. And to remember that even as this, what seems like a dark time, and that things are more like they are, like I said, being prohibitive and contracting rather than expanding, because we are coming out of it, and there's a much bigger period of darkness that we seem to be passing through. And remember, the penguin is a bird that doesn't fly, it swims, right? A bird, that transcendental, spiritual consciousness, the esoteric language of the bird, and the water, as well as the substance of life, and represents the flow of spirit and our own feelings and our emotional feelings. And so the penguin, as a bird that swims through the water, has an incredible skill set here. Also, penguins live in, the places where the contrast of light and dark is the most drastic. And also, too, the male penguins will, they will sit on their eggs, and they all kind of huddle together into this large group in order to maintain themselves as they are taking care of their progeny, the next, the next generation, the, the growth cycle continuing on of life. This is a reminder of our ability to move through the medium of our own feelings and our spirit, and still gain a sense of spiritual transcendence, and also that part of the life cycle of the penguin is to establish an incredible amount of sturdiness and fortitude as a result of going through a period of very intense darkness. The wintertime in Antarctica, right? There's literal darkness and very little in the way of heat, which is also an important part of life, by the way. So this also shows when to be aware that there's endurance, there's determination, that there's a need to focus, right? The period of difficulty is passing, and growth has been the result of it. And so we can kind of tap back into it to get through this period as well. We've done this before, and we will do it again. So to remind ourselves that even though it seems that way, and it is, we don't want it to steal our joy, because I think that's really what seems to be happening here for a lot of people. And I'm not suggesting that that's part of the process, is learning how that happens so that you don't allow it to happen for yourself, because it's your own joy and your own sense of real passion in life that is where your energy comes from. And it can be very difficult to tap into that when you are grieving, when you're suffering, when you're going through a trauma. Like, absolutely. But we have to bring ourselves back to that place when the need to be in survival mode has passed, okay? Now, this is about leadership, the tiger. When it says being called on to provide leadership, so trust that you're capable of doing so. Well, part of that, too, is you have to open the door to your higher self. You can't be trusted to be a good leader for yourself or anyone else until you're able to establish that connection with your higher self and open the door and have your awareness and your conscious awareness be influenced by your higher self. If you're not doing that, how can you possibly lead other people or even be trusted for leadership? And when I say leadership, I mean just like whatever that 10th house is for you is going to be is going to influence this as well. Especially if you're a Capricorn person, or you have strong Capricorn, or you, but your 10th house in general, I think, is really showing you where you step into your own sense of like leadership in your life. You have to open the door and establish the connection to your higher self, right? You have to establish a connection to something more than just this material or your own consciousness. And again, the Prince of Swords, that's what the battle is with it, because the ego is pulling the chariot. And we'd been doing so well. And I think that's where the defeat comes from, is that energy had been and continues with Mars in Taurus right now to be very industrious. But when we hit this place where the battle feels so, just so much in the mind and in the intellect, and if we're not establishing a sense of real joy and purpose, then it's so easy. It's so easy to feel that defeat. So Archangel Raphael is also part of this. So number 8, this is about blessings and miracles and healing. This is about really healing. You see the heart chakra in the pink. You see the orb of green. These are 2 colors that are related to the heart chakra. One having to do with compassion and our sense of connection coming from the heart. And then also this really, the green being this life, our connection to the Schumann resonance, right? Our connection to the planet, our own electromagnetic field that emanates and is part of our connection to life in general, right? It really is coming from the heart, but the heart also has to be tender and vulnerable in order to allow that connection. So that semi-permeable membrane that Cancer represents, I mean, it's so important for it to be functioning and strong, but also allow in what is needed to grow in order to be able to hold the full resonance of that solar energy. That's the 5th house. That's our joy and our passion, right? The thing about Raphael is that if we this is the kind of the miracle that we can allow into our lives, if only we were to open the door, right? So Raphael is going to show up oftentimes in the guise of another human being, right? Or another person, a helpful other in some way. So it may not be a person. It may be a synchronicity. It may be a song that comes on. You may have non-physical guidance, right? Your guidance team, ancestors, things like that. This is a healing of the heart as well with all of this heart chakra energy. Renewal of a lost dream. That's a strong one that sticks out to me when it comes to this card. And again, it's only when we can open the door willingly to our higher self, to source, to God, whatever our spirit, we allow in. And maybe this tiger energy is like just basically having the capacity to listen to our own inner voice, to pay attention to the subtleties, to know when to advance and when to yield. And is a big part of that in particular. When to, what is it that needs to be given back to the source, right? To be released, to accept some sort of defeat in an area because you realize that's where your growth is really happening. It has to be given over to the larger process. And I think that there's a sense of being very open to your own subtle intuitive voice, but that if you have that closed off, it's very difficult. So maybe even just saying a prayer for yourself in the spirit of Raphael, Archangel Raphael, to create that space in order for a miracle to happen, to renew that lost dream, to feel a sense of your heart really healing and not feeling just like losing all passion for life. Because Five of Swords, that can be... luckily it is upright. If it was reversed, I'd be really worried about some people. And there are people that are not going to be able to face or to feel that pain without escapism in some way. But I think many people are really, truly wanting to find that joy. And perhaps they will have their healing miracle moments. Or perhaps you will be an agent for that in people in your lives. So that's something to consider as starseeds as well. So we're going to get on to some astrology here, if you don't mind, and get a sense of what's going on. And now I covered a lot of the week, obviously, I covered a lot of the week with... Sorry, I'm multitasking. On Friday in the astrology report, we covered a lot of the week, this coming week, because there's just so much happening and so much has been happening. And I think that has been such a distraction, right? Such a distraction, and doesn't even have to be truly a distraction as much as, what are you going to do with this information, right? It's good to be able to take it in. Venus is in Gemini. It is not necessarily unrealistic to maybe consider that. Oh, hold on, guys. I don't have this queued up at all. Jeez. It's not out of the realm of possibility to continue to embody in a lot of ways this dialectic within the things that have real value to us, and like going back and forth. I think the struggle in that way, it is like, what is valuable, what is meaningful to me, like what allows me to establish that sense of real balance within my physical material reality. How do I feel a sense of symmetry, right? And the back and forth. The Gemini has not necessarily been very easy in that way, but with Mintaka right now, I'm gonna go into what this could mean, especially for the Mintakan starseeds. It's been coming up a lot in the personal readings. I've been having my own kind of connections with that Mintakan story. And if you're not familiar with it, the short Cliff Notes version here, as I get this queued up, is Mintaka is a star in the belt of Orion, and there is a water world that had existed around Mintaka that no longer. So those souls who are Mintaka and Starseed, so we're looking at 22 degrees Gemini, there is a soul, there's an innate frequency, there is a soul memory of this experience of losing one's world, and also being in this water world, in the medium in which, like a penguin, for instance, boy, wow. Sometimes I envision the penguin energy. Sometimes it's the ocean mammals like dolphins or whales. But it is in that medium that the Mintaka and starseeds are the most comfortable. So other people have described it as feeling a profound sense of sadness whenever they are near the ocean or near water, especially the ocean, but not being in it. And there's a deep grief for losing this. And I think that many Mintaka and starseeds are here now as with that innate soul memory, very intentionally to be here to bring in that. So whatever the story of that is, there's something profoundly powerful about living through it as a soul. And whether it was destroyed by means of natural phenomenon, or there was some type of intervention by the other Orions in the system, right? Because there's a lot of different Orions in the Orion system, are there not? And they're not all the reptilian AI regressives, but they're not, they are definitely there as well. And so you can imagine that any system that would be within the larger Orion system that is just trying to coexist peacefully, could find themselves in a similar situation to what we're experiencing now and have in the past, right? The Atlantean, Lemurian, all of those things. So it's very much here. And there's a sense of wanting to engage with the experience again, right? And to allow oneself to be kind of built back up energetically by experiencing what it's like to be back in that space. But kind of there's a little bit more, it's a little bittersweet, I think, to bring yourself into this new version of that, right? To come into new territory, to take those experiences and apply them to, as a soul, to this situation. So I talked about this actually in the Catalyst classroom because I was making connections to a number of charts actually that had this, that also Lilith was involved. So it's not outside, like I said, it's not out struggle to be very much in the embodied realm of Venus in Gemini right now, especially around Mintaka, because that's where Venus is right now. It's in conjunction with Mintaka and the star Capella, which is also at about 22 degrees Gemini longitudinally. So those are both really starseed origins. But the Mintaka story, along with Procyon, right? This is where the sun will be very soon. This is where Lilith will return back to, and this is opposite Pluto right now. So Procyon is a starseed origin place. This is a system that closed down its borders, right? I mean, the borders shut down at a soul level. So no new souls are incarnating, and no souls that had exited that system and incarnated elsewhere could come back, right? And there's another level of grief there. And that story of what it, are the borders opening back up for Procyon? Has that happened? Is the experience of having to establish a deeper core of connection to life part of the Procyon message? I think it's varied, and I'm really hoping this week we're going to go into this at the Catalyst classroom a lot deeper. You're going to see Mercury is in conjunction to Sirius. There are starseed with asteroid Ceres right now, and Mintaka, right? Venus at 22 degrees Gemini. So all of these stories seem really relevant as like a remembrance, and not to get pulled into the intensity and the grief of those experiences, but to bring those experiences into your starseed experience. What are you here to bring that forward? For what reason, right? To remind, to grow and to evolve and to hold the space for something new to come in. And if it was the result of bad decisions, power dynamics, right? There's also something to be said for that as well, that there is something much deeper, and that we don't have to engage in the dialectic forever, which is something that is a really great control mechanism. So it's our choice to come out of that and return back to a more primal, right, speaking of Lilith, sense of connection to life. So many of these themes are coming up now with us, but also too with the starseed connection. So Mercury in conjunction with Sirius, I mean, this is very much a Thoth or Hermetic type of experience into the sacred feminine, into the infinite space of creation that life can only come if there is a space for this spark in order to inhabit. The seed can only grow into life if there is a medium for it to grow. And so the Sirius is the star the most identified with that infinite void, to that transcendental and changeless wisdom that is the feminine, the sacred goddess, right? Isis, Inanna, okay? There is the space or the medium, the magnetic field, right, is where this spark is able to inhabit. So Mercury, as the magician, as the Hermetic element, as Thoth in a lot of ways, is identifying with, is connecting to this space, is allowing us to conceptualize, but also to be able to identify that this space is where our real power comes from, and where our mercurial power can certainly come from as a magician, or as a magus, magician, or just a conscious creator of our own experience and our own consciousness. It's not enough to just be conscious in terms of, just like with them, the light of the world reversed. I mean, Mercury is a perfect agent right now for opening that door in conjunction with Sirius, because it represents that door, right? The door into the infinite, part of ourselves where our real power comes from, and that is the connection to the goddess, right? To the feminine aspect of Source or the Great Spirit. And the esoteric knowledge in the mystery schools, obviously, were very aware of this. And this is why the United States birth chart has a sun conjunct Sirius. So it's about this feminine space that is so important. So the moon is moving through Sag today, and there's a yod, right? There's going to be a yod with Uranus and the sun. That means that the moon will be quincunx both of these places, but they themselves will be sextile. So that finger of God coming into a real where the fire is really burning at that point. And so it's not necessarily easy, right? Because you have a quincunx, but it has to do with these relationships with what? Taurus and Cancer, right? With the soil and the root system, right? They are fundamentally linked to each other, and only in their relationship that can they create an experience of harmony and transmutation. So, and these late degrees, 19, 20, 21 degrees of Sagittarius, are really about utilizing and anticipating what's going to be necessary in order to establish a sense of provision and security for the collective, for the social order, for the larger family unit, right? For your contribution to society, because Sagittarius in the 9th house is the belief system, right? And the sense of not just believing and establishing a dogma, but to actually be able to anticipate based on that larger pattern of meaning, what to do in order to alchemize and to create something, to quincunx that is with Uranus and the sun. It's about productive relationships. It's about identifying with the family, the spiritual community, with the sun and Cancer, our own personal power, and also Uranus and Taurus, right? I mean, there has to be establish that root system and a sense of spontaneity, a sense of growth that comes out of nothing. I mean, Uranus and Mars and the North Node will all be conjunct at this degree on August 1st. I do feel like we are leading up to this point, but right now with Pluto and Capricorn, yeah, we, at this Pluto return of the U.S., we are reaching the depth now. Like, we are in full exposure mode in terms of it and unpredictable changing and shifting and transformation that, you know, the trigger of it is Uranus, and it's in the resources, it's in value, it's in currency, it's in material reality, it is in and down to like the actual physical living soil of the planet and the plate system, right? And the Schumann resonance. All of those things are very much related to Taurus. The actual medium is the planet itself and the electromagnetic field, right? It's the medium in which growth is able to happen. So this is leading up to, again, August 1st. So I feel like I've talked a lot already about what's this week is entailing in terms of the astrology. So I don't need to belabor it other than to point out what I've already established. Now, we do have a full moon coming on the 13th, so that the moon will cross the galactic center and come into Capricorn. It's going to meet Pluto, and the full moon will be pretty much in conjunction with the Saturn-Pluto conjunction of January 2020. So as I've talked 2 years especially, and where we're ready to make space within ourselves, our identity, our sense of expression, and spiritual identity in order to allow and invite in this miracle, these blessings, the beloved, right, to the source, to a sense, specifically the nurturing aspect of the goddess. Now, asteroid Ceres, the goddess of the grain, agriculture, right, the seasons, she is in conjunction with Procyon right now and will continue to be so. So these themes keep coming back around about, you know, the fine line between protection and nurturing versus isolation and Munchausen and keeping out, you know, where the boundaries get so solidified that there's no growth, or there is a sense of, what's that word, jingoism, right? Where it's just so isolationist, you know, the negative side of nationalism, and the way that people's feelings and sensitivities are manipulated in order to keep the power so strongly within the boundaries. So it's very important, and we're establishing this in a number of different ways right now, and so it will become even more so as the destruction of the establishment that is more of a provisionary thing. Our governments, our economy, our healthcare system, the physical materium of reality, and all of the systems that we are connected by as they go through absolute destruction. We're gonna come back around to when that particular balancing of accounts was initiated in January 2020, and get to really get a sense within ourselves and with full illumination, really, what it is that where we've struggled and have been defeated, and where we can gracefully let that go as a means to start a new cycle and begin to grow again, this time better, right? Because the forest burns down doesn't mean there isn't a root system that is still absolutely firmly established and now is getting fertilized by that forest fire. And that's the Cancerian element, Taurus and Cancer. So there's a lot here with that connection with Cancer and Taurus to really ground and stabilize us. And when Venus comes into Cancer, it's going to be, I think, a lot easier to embody that root system and sense of personal empowerment. Right now, she is still kind of, you know, experiencing the dialectic and the back and forth within the very nature of value and worth and relationships and all of that stuff. There's not a lot of stability, but we're about to come out of it, I think, really soon. When she comes into Cancer, it's going to be a little bit easier. And then we're going to have Chiron and Jupiter soon enough are going to start their retrograde as well in Aries. Pull back in terms of that self-assertion and that forward momentum and even expanding on a sense of who we are and our subjective experience. But it's going to be an important learning time when that's happening. So, my friends, I think I'm going to leave it there for today. So I'm going to check in with the stream real quick and the chat and see what's going on. VZ says, wow, this reading is so spot on in what I've observed, especially in the feels I have been feeling. Just wow. And Barb says, it's so true. And Vegan Banana Bread said, Pluto too strong. I think that the moon in Scorpio over the weekend, yeah, I think it was. I mean, and everybody experienced it differently, but I've definitely seen some moments of like struggle and having, figuring out within yourself how you can not shut yourself off from that, especially in those that are very close to you, your family, your loved ones, right? Those are very Cancerian elements. How to not shut yourself off, but establish good boundaries. And at the same time, not shut yourself off from your own feels too. And it's really strong. And again, Saturn's retrograde in Aquarius. Neptune is retrograde in Pisces. It is not always, the sun is glaring now that it's burned off the fog. And, strangely enough, it's gotten very dry here when Neptune was in its direct motion, it was very humid. It was really, really humid to the point where I was like, oh, water's not an issue. And now as soon as it's gone retrograde, within like a week or two, it has really started to dry up where I'm at. And I know that that's the case for other people too. It's been that way. It's just very interesting connect. It's going to be the Capricornian forecast for Cap Sun, Moon and Rising is going to be, I'm going to put that out very soon in the next day or so that'll be available to people. I also want to share, just to let you know, I still have the Starseed readings, but I'm also doing Starseed appreciation readings. So these are 30-minute recorded readings. They're only for return clients, and it's only $27. So reach out either through catalystenergies.net. You can book right through there, or you can email me. That's in the description box below. Both of those links are in the description box below. And we're going to be talking about, like I said, Procyon and Sirius in relation to Lilith and the feminine and the goddess this week in the Catalyst Classroom. If you're interested in that, that's in the description box below. But I just, it's important that people are taking care of themselves and being very cognizant of how intense it is. And yeah, Pluto is really strong right now. And it's not going to let up necessarily because it's still in its retrograde. So the exposure period continues on beyond this point. And it's just that it'll come back in its prograde motion and cross over this particular point again in the future. And so when that happens, there will be so much more I think that will be much more of a rebuilding, and not rebuilding as much as a metamorphosis, right? We're not going to go back, right, to what has been, because we have something new to grow into and develop into. So it's like trying to go back and rebuild the forest when nature's going to do that based on what has already happened, and to see the root system of the forest, our own root system to ourselves, to each other, to life, so that we can really, in a very healthy way, grow back. But it doesn't come without all of the human feels. And the best thing we can do is know our toolkit and our skills to and what really does bring us joy and passion, so that we can keep doing. Be back on Friday for the astrology report. Keep an eye out for other content. So best way to do that is to subscribe to this channel, hit this like button so you can really support this channel and have this content make its way out to other people, commenting, sharing this content. All of those things actually do support this channel very much. A subscriber through Subscribestar. That link is in the description box below, and that supports all of the resources that make this possible as well. And I appreciate that so much. So I'll see you guys on Friday. Have a great week. Follow Catalyst Energies on Telegram and Facebook. That's in the description box below to stay up to date. And I'll see you guys all soon. Take care. Bye.